We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton,
Here.
Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Robert Beadle is absent, Josh Halquist is absent, David Allison,
Here.
James Weiss,
Here.
it's a quorum of council.
Move to approve the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, the agenda will stand approved as submitted. Does council have any conflicts of interest to disclose? Hearing none, communications by and petitions from visitors. We don't have any guest speakers scheduled for tonight. Are there any audience comments regarding agenda items? If you could just state your name and residence for the record, please. There's a microphone up here. And we have councilman online, so the microphone helps them to hear. Just your name and residence for the record.
Don Scott, 204 Boardwalk Way, and actually I'm here kind of for North Star Lumber, I guess you would say, 701 First Street. And it has to do with some of the taxes that you guys are looking at. On the timely filing, we get a 2% kickback from that. And I did some figures last quarter, I think it was, with credit cards. I lost $30. It doesn't sound like much, but you're talking a lot with a lot of people in town. I lost $30 that I had to come up with out of my pocket after I've already collected the tax because of my credit card sales. And then another one is if you go to $7,500 on a sales tax cap at 8%, it's $600 sales tax. For $600, you can get 2,000 pounds of freight from Seattle or Anchorage. That's be devastating for the lumberyard. Even if you raise it to $7,500 at 6%, that's $450. That's a round trip ticket for a truck to Anchorage. I mean, I think if you do anything with sales tax, I think you guys are gonna run more business out of town than you're gonna collect. Fishermen already come up with coolers and boxes full of food and all their stuff from Seattle now. I think if you raise the sales tax, they're just gonna figure out a way to bring more. I just don't think it's a good idea to do anything with the sales tax. I think what you need to look at is the exemptions and clean up the exemptions and see if we can't raise revenue that way. Let's see. We tried to split sales tax once before, didn't work. They just raised it 6%. I think that's all I got for notes, so. So that's it, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you. Other audience comments on agenda items?
Greg Meyer, 1 Henry Road. I think the sales tax, I talked to a few business owners and they don't really like the split either. It's not a big deal for me. I'm all computerized. I can change everything in 10, 15 minutes. But some of these people that have registers still, it's a lot more onerous to them. So that's one point. And the calculations I made, I think if you just did, instead of doing the big splits, I think if you just raised it 6.5%, it made it 6.5%. By my numbers, you come up with about 245,000. Does that sound right? you got 170,000 for the 1% in the winter.
I think it would be, well, yeah, I think it'd be 160.
You had 170 on the.
Could I have 170? Yeah,
Anyway, it's about 245,000.
I think the listing was per 1%, it's about 320.
Right.
So it'd be half of that.
So I came up with 245,000 at 6.5%, 367.5 at 6.75. Keeping it under 7. I don't know. To me, it looks good. I don't know. You got to come up with this money somehow. I don't know the best way to do it. I just heard some feedback on the splits, and also you hear that if you do a 7.5, before you know it, next year it's going to be 7.6, and then it's going to be 7.7. It's just so easy just to ratchet it back up. So that's the feedback I got in town from some of the business owners. I think one of the things with the sales tax that we've kind of been talking about for the last 8-9 months, especially on that cap, is not necessarily single item things that we're worried about. I think, in my opinion, we're trying to get tax on processors. They'll burn through $20,000, $30,000 of electricity a month. And we're charging them $180. I burn through. I just filled up my fuel, $12,000 worth. You guys get $180. You guys leaving a lot of money on the table with big users that can afford it, and we can write it off. And we just did some catering up here. You guys got $180. I don't know. It's just you're leaving a lot of money on the table. I think we're concentrating on single item things. And a lot of people are buying that stuff outside anyway because it's a lot cheaper. Most of the stuff they're going to buy here because they need it here. They want your expertise, or they're renting something, or they're here for another reason, or they have to get fuel here. In my opinion, I'd like to see the cap raised, even though it will affect me tremendously. But anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on agenda items?
Mark Fronapple, 813 Woodland Drive. I'm here to speak on behalf of ordinance 1156. On 5.39.020, payment by consumer and collected by the distributor. Item number 2 on there, will be dispensed into watercraft from floating fuel dock located in the Cordova Small Boat Harbor. So I didn't know we had competition. I'd love to have a fuel dock in the harbor, but it's not there yet. I don't know what that's in there for, and that was just of a concern. You see what I'm talking about? So, page 50, item 2, all the way down at the bottom. The distributor shall require the customer to pay the tax at the time of sale, or cause the customer to sign a statement that the fuel is either not going to be dispensed into a vehicle or watercraft within the city, will be dispensed into a watercraft from the floating fuel dock located in the Cordova Small Boat Harbor. So I'm not sure.
Cordova Outboard used to have one. I don't know if they still do or not, but they used to have one on the.
Well, yeah, it's not on a floating fuel dock, so I'm wondering what that's in there for. It's something
maybe.
that needs to be addressed.
Beecher used to have the one over there where Trident's place is too. That was
Yeah, but,
floating.
yeah. So we can, I'm just bringing to your attention that there's not a floating fuel dock in Cordova that I know of.
Yeah.
The second thing is for the ordinance to increase the cap. I do support the increased cap for generation of revenue. These ordinances all have effect on our business based upon the fact that we're the #1 collector of most of these taxes that you want to implement, whether it's tenders, fuel deliveries, gas station. And I'm not a proponent of the split sales tax. I just don't think that I understand where you wanna bring it into the community where you can get some of the outside people. But at the same time, I think it's a heavy lift for the vendors and the, businesses in town. So, that's it, thanks.
Thank you.
Other audience comments on agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Chairpersons and representatives of boards and commissions, CCMC.
Good evening, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come in this evening and talk a little bit more detail than what I normally do when I give my presentation to the council. The ordinance that the council approved and was ultimately approved by the voters earlier this year that created the CCMC authority requires that I give a annual report to the city council. And the document that you see in your packet is actually the same document that is required by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that our hospital has to do every year. So they're very specific in what they require us to actually look at and evaluate within the hospital every year. Even though the hospital's been a critical access hospital for many years, this is the first time the hospital's ever created one of these reports, even though it's been required for years. So we've always had a deficiency in the CMS surveys that we've had. So what I thought I'd do is just go over some of the high points of this. There's a lot of detail in here for you to look at, and I definitely will be more than willing to answer any questions that you might have now or at any time down the road. A couple of things that really helped the hospital last year. This report's on 2016 because we have to have year-to-date data to meet the CMS requirements for the report. So we changed auditors this year, so it took us a little bit longer to get our audit done. So that made us have to wait a little bit longer to be able to get data to put into this report. Big things that happened in 2016 for the hospital was that we actually added a second physician. Dr. Sanders joined the medical staff with Dr. Blackadar, and this is the first time in about 15 years that the hospital has had 2 full-time physicians that actually live in Cordova year-round. It had a big impact on the hospital as well. So we also created a plan to reduce the reliance on temporary staff that come in from outside the area, typically work for about 13 weeks and then leave. And when I started last year as the CEO, we had no full-time employee nurses on the hospital side that actually lived in Cordova. Every single nurse was a temporary nurse. We've corrected that now, and we have just a shade over half of our nurses that actually live in Cordova now and are paying taxes in the town year-round as well. Probably the biggest issue that I've seen since I came on board has been the lack of continuity in leadership at CCMC over the years. There's absolutely no way that you can create implementation plans and improvement plans to continue to do the things that the hospital needs to do without having some solid year-to-year consistency in what's going on. It's so unfair to the staff at the hospital when there's always turnover with the leadership, because every person that comes in as a leader is going to want to do things different. And the staff is starting to get to know how things are working with somebody when that person leaves. You really don't know how much of a negative impact that has on the hospital. It's the worst thing that's happened to that facility for years. So hopefully we can continue to correct that. Our goal was to eliminate the need for temporary staff and have all full-time local staff. A couple of things that really happened because we brought on board a new physician last year is that the amount of patient days on the hospital side increased by 150% over 2015. The visits in the clinic went up 9% from the previous year. One of the big things that we added was a CT scanner last year. That increased the radiology procedures by 19% over the previous year. So a lot of things happening with the facility, trying to make improvements. Financially, we had some interesting things happen last year. We had improvements in the balance sheet for the current assets. The accounts payable dropped by 38% from the previous year. That means we were able to pay off debt that the hospital had that had been sitting there for quite a while. The biggest thing one of the biggest things that's hurting the hospital now is the PERS payments. The hospital is paying out about $40,000 every payday, every 2 weeks, that goes into PERS that doesn't impact any of our current employees. So we're required to match 8% of our employees' salaries to go into PERS. They get that 8%. On top of that, we have to pay now over 23% of our employees' salaries to go to fix the deficit in the PERS statewide. So if you look as well, we now added last year on our financial statements, the hospital has a debt owed to PERS of over $7 million that wasn't there 2 years ago. Now, that doesn't impact our cash flow right now, but it is a liability that's put on there just because of new accounting procedures that the state requires for the retirement system. That's a huge deficit for the hospital. If you think about it, $40,000 times 26 payrolls, that's a lot of money that we're paying out that none of our employees are really going to benefit from. It's to pay off the debt in the PERS system for the mismanagement of that system over the years. We increased our total patient revenue in 2016 by over $1 million from 2015. That was a 12% increase. Our wages and benefits went up about 8% over the previous year. That was due to the fact that when I came on board last summer, we started increasing the salaries that we were paying because we were adding staff, but doing away with temporary staff, which cost us a little bit more for the temporary staff than what it does for the local employees that we keep. Some of the statistics that we saw, the acute admissions, that's the number of people that were admitted to the hospital, was 82 in 2016. We only had 38 in 2015. Big increase there. The number of patient days, as I mentioned, we had 202 patient days last year compared to 80 the previous year. We also had increase in observation bed days. Clinic visits went up 9%. So we're increasing the volume of what we're seeing in the hospital, the services that we're actually providing. One of the interesting things that a lot of people don't really think about though, now because we have 2 new doctors in town that are working at the hospital, in 2015, the hospital actually transferred 51 patients out of here by air medical, most of the time to Anchorage. In 2016, we dropped that down to 36. So if you just count what the average cost is for an air medical flight from Cordova to Anchorage, we saved the community about $500,000 by not transferring people out of here because they didn't need to. And a lot of that's because we have 2 doctors now that are local. They're very willing and want to help patients and keep them here. And the CT scanner helped us because now we're able to look at head injuries or spinal injuries, abdominal injuries and illnesses as well to determine if they really need to go to Anchorage or not. A couple of other areas that we've made some big improvements. The hospital over the last few years has really had trouble with their quality improvement program. And because of turnover, we've not had the ability to keep that continuity to grow that quality program. We now have a quality nurse that's full-time, lives here in Cordova. She's also doing our infection control, which was another area that we had some issues with. So we're starting to get things moving there. And as I mentioned, I think the last time I was here, the nursing home side of CCMC was one of 3 nursing homes in the state of Alaska that was awarded the Excellence in Quality Award. There are 18 nursing homes in Alaska. Only 3 were awarded that award. And that goes to show the good things that we're doing at the hospital. All the while, we're trying to cut our budget. We cut 9 FTEs last year, just in 2016. So far this year, we've cut 4.5. We're looking at maybe another 2 to eliminate, to try to right-size the organization. So there's, the report goes on. I won't go into to all the specific detail because we have to go into every single department in the hospital. But there's just a lot of information in here for you to look at, and just wanted to let you know that the staff at the hospital are very excited. They really appreciate your support as a city council as well, and looking forward to us to continue the improvements that we have been making at the hospital. So, any questions?
Any questions, council? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You had a presentation from the school board, and it looks like they've left now, so we'll dispense with that report. We don't have our student council representative yet. Approval of the consent calendar. There's 2 items, resolution 10-17-26 and excused absence for Josh Hallquist. So generally that's just a roll call vote to the clerk.
James Burton,
Yes.
Ken Jones,
Yes.
Jeff Guard,
Yes.
Dave Allison,
Yes.
James Weiss,
Yes.
Okay, the consent calendar is approved. Approval of the minutes of October 4th, 2017 regular council meeting.
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. We have no bids to consider. Officers' reports. Hopefully stuck it in here. I have a little summary from Tom Baylor called me, and he wanted to give a report from the PISWAC meeting. I don't have it with me, but I think I can summarize. There was a election of the executive council, so there are new executive council members seated, and I can fold those names into my next report off the paper. They're considering applications. It sounds like the executive committee is maybe in negotiations with a finalist, but that's where they're at. Kenny?
He signed his contract last night,
Oh, he did, okay,
so, but I'm not sure if I can disclose the name quite yet.
sure.
But we'll be issuing a press release soon.
Okay, great. So there is a new executive director hired there. And did I miss anything, Kenny? It seemed like there are a couple other notes from the PISWAC meeting.
Tim's gonna stay on for a little bit and train up the new guy, Tim Joyce.
Mhm.
And,
There were some capital projects, I think you discussed and appropriated for some capital projects that have.
yeah, there's a bunkhouse project, the waterway at Unaquick didn't finish, but they did get the engineering done, so we're gonna be able to complete that next year. And, just good, because we needed the new raceway water inlet for that hatchery to be able to meet with our requirements for the increases that have already been approved by the state. Yeah, I think pretty much it.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. And then I had my written report. Any questions for me or? Okay, clerk's report, or manager's report, sorry.
Well, since last week, I've been working on the ordinances and some other things like the waste oil, and if you go back to the plan that we submitted in May, we had that pretty well spelled out for everyone. We're updating that now, but a variety of things like that. Reminder that I'll be gone for 10 days starting on Friday afternoon until the 30th, and I'll have a lot to say when we get to the budget ordinances, so we'll just leave it there.
Okay, questions?
Do you have any update on the status of the polar bear island lease?
I do. Tony,
I did give him his agreement to sign, he'd bring it in this week.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Clerk's report. Any other questions for Manager Lanning? Councilman Jones.
So I had another follow-up question. I know I asked it last meeting, just regarding the Adams Street sidewalk project. Are we gonna see that come back up to us for additional funding requests because the batch plant left town?
I don't know the answer to that. At this point, I don't know, we're gonna have to bid the thing out, and we'll have to see where the bids come in, and the state match and those things. We're hoping that it will not, but I don't know that for certain. Given the delays, and really our decision process took 2 turns, but we still had time to get it done. And just a couple of weeks ago, we finally got back the historic preservation review from the state. So they've had it for months.
I might be able to help a little bit. DOT's coming next week, and they're going to discuss the Powell Creek Road project, but also their final design on resurfacing from mile point 0 right there at the Orchid Cannery Road all the way past the culvert. So they will have a batch plant here next year, pretty sure. And they said they're also going to talk about the Adams project. So I think they're planning on pavement there next summer. And Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, they haven't set a time yet, but they'll be in Cordova next week.
Okay.
So we hope that isn't effective.
Then one more question. If that is true and they're bringing a batch plant to town, is there any way we can have a contract in place to make sure it happens, unlike our situation down at the ADF&G office corner, where we didn't have a contract in place and they left town?
Yeah. That was a little odd
Yeah.
in that. But yes, we'll have it bid out, we'll have contracts signed, we'll be ready to go.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Just real quick on the audio, I'm having a hard time hearing Ken. I don't know if that's a volume control issue or a mic thing.
Okay, we'll try and get up on the mic. Thank you. Clerk's report.
She didn't put a written report in. Susan had to leave unexpectedly. There was a death in the family of a friend of hers. And then she's on vacation till she'll be back November 2nd. I guess I could just add the assessors were here last week. They were starting their process. We have the special election coming up on the 7th.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the clerk? Okay, we have the staff quarterly reports in the packet. Any comments or questions, council? Okay, hearing none. We have correspondence letter from the State Assessor's Office with the full value determination for Cordova. Next item of business is ordinances and resolutions. Item 13 is ordinance 1156, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, adopting Chapter 5.39 motor fuel excise tax and imposing an excise tax of 4 cents per gallon on motor fuel dispensed into vehicles and watercraft from a fuel facility within Cordova. First reading.
Move to approve?
Second.
Have a motion to approve and a second. Councilman Allison, would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, we've talked about it before. This is first reading, so it will come back to us again. I think this allows us to capture some more of the revenue from outside of the community that leaves the community, and spread the burden of tax around to more people. So I do support this particular tax, and 4 cents is a good starting point.
Thank you, Council Allison. And it's really helpful, council members, if you state whether you're in favor or opposed to a motion. It helps a manager in knowing which taxes and stuff you're for, but just in general, it helps signal the rest of council and the public what your thoughts are or intentions are. Further discussion. Councilman Weiss or Burton? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Councilman Burton and Weiss, I didn't hear either of your votes. Were you in favor?
Sorry, I cut out there once. I will say for.
Okay, Councilman Weiss and Councilman Burton? Councilman Burton, do we still have you online?
Yeah, I said I was for it, I'm sorry.
Okay, so motion carries. Next item, 14, is ordinance 1158, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code, Chapter 5.40, to decrease sales tax from 6% to 4% from October 1st through March 31st, and to increase sales tax from 6% to 8% from April 1st through September 30th. First reading.
Move to approve?
Second.
Have a motion to approve and a second. Councilman Allison, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, this is one ordinance that I do not support at this time. There may be a time in the future when we need to play with the sales tax rate, but I think this is not the current time to do that. I'm not in favor of a split tax anytime. Although that does, again, gather more revenue from the seasonal people. I think this time there's other ways to do that, so I do not support this ordinance at this time.
Further discussion, Councilman Gard?
Just so we know what kind of dollars we'd be looking at. Sounds like the voice of the people tonight was fairly unanimous about no amenity towards a split. It makes a more complicated system, harder to use. If we were to consider doing a 6.5 or 6 3/4 or 7 or whatever, what kind of revenues would we be looking at raising if we just raised?
Yeah, actually don't have my picture with me, but I think it's 640,000. I said 320, but I think it's 640 for each percent. So 0.5% would be 320. I think Greg was correct. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, it's 6.5% is 245, 6 3/4 is 367.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, we get 3.1 million out of 6%, so that's roughly 520,000 per percent.
Yeah, it's,
It'd be 260 for
no, yeah, 330, so it's
per percent.
550.
Okay, so about a $250,000
Would be 0.5%.
would be a 0.5%.
Yeah, for some reason I had that 640 stuck in my mind, but you're correct.
That and 12 million other numbers.
Okay. Was that your question, Councilman Gar?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we
Or comment?
need to look, still be looking at potential places to raise revenue, we could certainly do that without making the system more complicated. And
Okay, are you proposing that as an amendment?
I need to sit down and look at my own budget, but we're looking at raising about 170 with the split before, or what was it we were looking at raising with the 6-4 split?
We were looking at, I think it's 300,000, it's written in the ordinance. The 8-4 split raises 300,000. The numbers aren't exact because the 8% in the summertime, there's more revenue produced in the 2 quarters, so the split was.
Well, we were looking at needing to raise 370 total.
Well, we have, our deficit in the budget right now is about 354, but, you know, that's part of the commentary that I've tried to provide earlier, is that 354 is pretty static. It doesn't allow additional maintenance. That's just holding the line for us, so that's your decision, but just so you understand that, that's the proposal for the basic budget that I submitted to you to balance the budget.
So at that, we'd be looking at, if we did the 4-cent motor fuel tax, we'd be looking at about 175.
Yes.
And if we did a 0.5%, we'd be looking at about 250,000 there. Yeah, I'd make a motion to amend the ordinance, instead of a 6-4 seasonal split, to make it a 6.5% year-round sales tax.
Okay, we have a motion done. I'm sorry, what was that online?
I can't hear what the amendment was.
Okay, the amendment was to modify from a split tax of 6-4 summer, winter, to a flat 6.5% sales tax year-round. Is there?
8-4, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, from 8-4 is current ordinance.
Okay.
So is there a second on the amendment? Okay, hearing none, it fails for lack of a second. Councilman Jones.
I'm completely opposed to this, even though I'm the one that brought it up in all the committee work. Just hearing from the public, it's not something that's favorable at all. Sounds like nobody wants us to touch the sales tax at this point, and I don't want to move forward with touching the sales tax at all. We've already raised property tax this year. Everybody's assessed values went up again. We just voted forward for a 4-cent per gallon on motor fuel. That raises 176,000. We have 2 more ordinances coming up that'll raise additional funds. Don't feel like it's necessary to raise sales tax at this time, and I would like to see additional cuts as well. So, those are my comments.
Further discussion on the sales tax?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burton.
On the split sales tax, it does sound like it's a little bit of a challenge for some of the vendors in town. My biggest fear And going to a split sales tax is exactly what happened when we went from 6.3 to 6, is that once you go up, it doesn't go back. And it's really easy to take out the seasonal split in the future and just leave it at, leave it at 8% year round. And I don't want that to be a solution. And, without some kind of sunset clause in this, which is that we can write into it, I just am uncomfortable with taking that approach too. So I think, I think I agree with what Mr. Jones said. We've got a couple other options on the table in front of us, and we can explore those. But at this point in time, I wouldn't be in favor of the split.
Okay. Sounds like there's 3 opposed so far. Anyone want to speak in favor of this motion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion fails. Okay, next item. Ordinance number 1159, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code Section 5.40.030C and Cordova Municipal Code 5.40.030D to increase the cap on sales tax from $3,000 to $7,500. First reading.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilman Allison, like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I do support this, this change. I know it does create some challenges for some of the businesses, and I hope we can work through those, but I think this is one section of our code where there's a lot of abuse that goes on. Keeping below that cap, and though a 7,500 cap doesn't solve that completely, I would be in favor of eliminating the cap myself, but I don't believe that there's support for that on council at this point in time. So the 7,500 cap will solve some of that problem, will improve some of our revenues, and I think that's it's one place where I can support raising the revenues slightly. So I do support it.
Further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilman Jones.
working some figures here. If somebody else on the phone wants to go first, I'm calculating something out really quick.
Yeah, was that Councilman Burton?
It is, but I'll wait for Mr. Jones.
He's just calculating some numbers. He said to go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, on the cap, a while back, I don't know, 2-3 years, something like that. I had tried to get this changed at one point in time. We only brought it up $500 from $2,500 to $3,000, and my reasoning back then was pretty much exactly like Mr. Myers said in his audience comment in the beginning, and also some of the other comments that have been made about some of the big single purchases that are made in town, where it is something that's a write-off for businesses and whatnot. And this is not something that affects everyday mom and pop shoppers. Kids going out and buying groceries, parents going out and buying groceries for their kids and things like that. This is something that targets some of those bigger bulk fuel purchases, big boat projects like I just had, like Mr. Jones has had, things like that, where, we should be paying a little bit more of the share of that. So I'm all for it. I don't know if I'd be for eliminating it completely, although I think 7,500 is maybe just the beginning of where I would, or on the low end of where I would cap it. I would say probably 10,000 or something like that. This go around if it was me, but I'm for it. I think we should do it. I tried to get this done a long time ago.
Councilman Jones.
Yeah, you know, of course, any tax is gonna send business out of town. I think we already know that. And I really worry about raising the cap 7,500 because at 6%, that'd be $450. I could buy a ferry ticket for my 23-foot long pickup and go get two and a half pallets worth of stuff in Anchorage and bring it back and pay for my ferry ticket just in tax savings alone, not even including the merchandise savings. I think this is just gonna incentivize people to shop outside. As far as, you know, we're trying to hit this 354, we've already voted for 176. And, you know, if we were to go to a 5,000 cap, on the paper says that that would raise 100,000. That would get us to 276, so we'd be short $75,000. The next ordinance raises an additional 30,000, so then we're within 50,000 of our goal. And I think that we could very easily reach that 50,000 with additional cuts to the budget somewhere. I'm sure you can find that savings. It's somewhere in the budget. I know you've already trimmed it millions of dollars, but I would like to see some more budget cutting to offset some of these additional taxes.
Are you proposing a $5,000 cap as an amendment?
Yeah, I would move to amend to from 3 to 5,000 cap on the sales tax.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, hearing none, the amendment fails for lack of a second. Further discussion?
I'd like to make a general comment here.
Councilman Garden.
I'd like to make kind of a general comment here, back to budget stuff. We have got a budget now that we've pared back quite a little bit. We don't have much for maintenance money in there. We don't have anything for contingencies for when stuff happens. It always happens, and we end up drawing out of permanent fund. We're not gonna have this permanent fund forever. And if we just keep doing business to where we live on the edge and we'll just say, oh, whatever happens, we'll take another $1 million out of the permanent fund this year when it happens. It's not, I mean, it's lowering our taxes and stuff for now, but it's not supporting the infrastructure and the community we have. And when something happens that we are forced to replace a harbor or a water system or whatever, we're not gonna have the money to do it. And the money's just not coming out of Juneau anymore. What we're trying to do is figure out how to adequately fund our whatever we want for services realistically with replacement dollars, maintenance dollars, all that kind of stuff as time goes by. And we're not gonna get there if we keep trying to cut and don't look at, and I'm not saying that any one form of revenue raising is the way to go, but we really do need to look at raising some revenues here.
So to tie that comment to this motion, you're in favor of this increase?
$7,500?
Okay. Further discussion, Council? Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I just would like to comment that, you know, you talk about taking money out of the permanent fund. We actually put 800,000 in earnings into the permanent fund this year, not including what we pulled out, but we earned $800,000 in the permanent fund. So if we can get to a status quo level with this budget, we will keep earning on the money that's already in there. If we can keep from taking any more out, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm sorry.
But just, you know, raising taxes for the sake of raising taxes to have an extra 300,000 in the general fund. I mean,
It's not one.
just, well, in case a tractor breaks down, I mean, we can't just tax ourselves out of our houses here. I mean,
No, I'm not.
we're already taxing.
I'm not in favor of that.
I mean, it's like, what pocket do you want to take it out of? You know?
I'm willing
Okay.
to use them out of mine.
All right,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burton.
Okay, so the first thing I want to address is Mr. Jones's comment about going up to Anchorage and buying a 2.5 pallets worth of merchandise there. I guess I'll reiterate that that is not the type of shopping, I guess I would say, that this typically, unless you're going to go spend $7,500 at the back door store or something, is going to affect. This is, we're talking about single big purchases, and they're not normally in the course of our day-to-day life. I mean, I don't know how, I can't even think of a time I've gone to the store and spent that kind of money, like, ever. So, that's, I get what you're saying, and I think that the attitude is noble, but I also think it's a little bit misguided as far as where this actually comes down to, what it comes down to affecting.
Okay, is there any, Councilman Jones, to the motion, please?
I have one more, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Councilman Burton.
Okay, the second point I wanted to bring up, I'm having a brain fart. You're gonna have to pass on me. I'll come back around in a second when I can figure out how to rephrase it.
Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I'd just like to reflect on Mr. Scott, Mr. Fisher's, and Mr. Blackler's testimony from the last two meetings, and Mr. Baylor's, opposing this ordinance due to detrimental effects it would have on the businesses of Cordova. I know in helping my father renovate his apartment building, there's many times we went to North Star Lumber and spent more than $7,500, and we did go to Anchorage and buy pallets full of construction materials because they weren't available in this town. But we tried to buy local as much as we could. As far as buying engines from Cordova Outboard or boiler systems from Plumline, there's plenty of transactions that occur in this town that this will affect. And $450 might not seem like a lot for somebody like me or for James, but for the regular individual, that could be the difference. And I want to go to Anchorage to pick this up and get my ferry ticket paid for, because it's going to be $4,000 in Cordova, it'll be $3,500 in Anchorage, but now it'll be $4,500 in Cordova and $3,500 in Anchorage. So they'll opt for that savings. I just think that this ordinance is going to drive business out of town. One of the reasons why we brought this up in committee work was we were trying to hit fuel ups, big, large fuel ups. That's what Mr. Meyer was hitting on, was fuel. And I agree, we want to hit those summertime fuel ups. I don't have a problem with hitting those. If we do pass this, I would like to see actually some more exemptions passed then on, house packages or construction packages and, motors for boat engines. We've had that in the past. That's how this whole cap was placed in the first place. And I worry about driving more business out of town.
Okay, and this is a first reading, so there'll be chances for amendments and subsequent readings as well. So we've had comments, go ahead.
And I guess one thing I forgot to mention is with the fuel, we already hit the fuel. We're hitting everybody. The fuel tax, one of the only ones that I would support. And, if we're trying to raise more money, rather than raise the cap, I would want to revisit 1156 and, maybe we go 5 cents or 6 cents instead of raising this cap. I think that'll have less of an effect on our economy in this town while we raise the money we're trying to raise than raising this cap. I know it's getting complicated here, but that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, Councilman Gard.
One last statement, and I'm not trying to be diametrically opposed to you, because I've enjoyed working with you and bouncing stuff off, so I don't want to be in an adversarial relationship here on council. But one of the things I remember from the 80s when we went through this stuff statewide, where money dried up from the state and stuff, we went to a really big deferred maintenance program that we never really got all the way out of. And one of the big things that was mentioned earlier tonight as being very problematic for the hospital's budget. I know it's problematic for the city budget, but it's a PERS system. We underfunded it purposely, quit funding it then, and it was never politically expedient to ever get caught up with it again. And we dug ourselves a huge hole with deferred maintenance, for lack of anything better to call it. And it's not a good way to go down the road for a community when we're trying to find a stable footing for ourselves.
Okay, we're kind of wandering off the motion, Council, and just about everybody but Councilman Weiss has spoke to it. And you've spoken in favor and opposed. Is there any other discussion on the, on raising the cap to $7,500? Councilman Burton?
I don't know if we chimed in, but he did, I'll let him take a stab at it, and then I'd like to pick up.
Councilman Weiss?
Yeah, I'd like to start. We had Councilman John and I was thinking for everything inside place. I do feel like we have a budget that we're going to try and backfill. I really appreciate Mr. Gard's continued reference to our deferred maintenance that we're bringing up. I'm not always positive this is a budget that's going to be sustainable for us. And you know, like we've said before, the schools have needs with their boiler. I wouldn't mind an amendment to this, as Councilman Baylor proposed for a building exemption, because he's stated more than once. You'll get that in the back end on your property taxes if people can buy and spend here. As far as sorry, I just blanked out here. Anyway, yeah, $7,500 sales tax cap. I would put an amendment where we don't tax for building materials or, you know, housing packages. This will not affect my shopping day to day in Cordova. I think any smart businessman in Cordova is going to look outside for Seattle or anything like that and try and find that best price that they're going to get. That's just going to happen. But this will definitely hit our bigger fuel purchases, and it's going to do what it's designed to do. I do worry about it affecting North Star in building packages and those kinds of things, though.
Okay, we have a little struggle with the sound quality there, but it sounds like you're in favor of the $7,500 tax cap. You would entertain a amendment that would exempt buildings, but you're not proposing that at this time.
Right.
Okay. Councilman Jones.
So I think we still have the motion on the floor for my amendment. We need to vote that down before we can make another.
Well, there was no second.
Okay.
So it failed for a lack of second.
Okay, so
we're speaking of the main motion.
Okay.
Councilman Jones has the floor. Councilman Burton.
Then, well, I can yield my time to Mr. Burton. I just would then make a motion to amend to include an exemption for house packages, building materials, and boat engines, if council would see that.
Okay, so for clarity, currently there's a $3,000 exemption for building packages. It's just the same for all of them, right? So I just want to make sure that you're making a proposal to have a complete exemption or to keep the exemption where it's at for.
Yeah, just keep it where it's at.
Okay. So we have, there's an amendment proposed amendment to keep the building package exemption at $3,000 where it's currently at. Is there a second? Okay, hearing none, that amendment fails for lack of a second. Councilman Burton.
Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to bring up about our budget in general that as it ties to this, some comments that have been made. The first is about our earnings on our permanent fund, and That's not something that we're putting in, that's just something that we're trying not to spend yet. We're trying to build back up our reserves, right? So don't think of this as putting, we've put 800, actually the number's 700,000. We've earned $700,000 in the interest. We're trying to let that build so that at some point in time, perhaps we'll hit, I don't know, some magic number where we can utilize some of the earnings as part of a self-sufficiency mindset. Okay, second thing, it's not $450 extra, it's $270 extra going from $3,000 to $7,500. You're already paying $180 in tax. The third thing I want to mention about our budget and our ways that we're trying to address this is this still isn't a long-term budget. We're just trying to balance the budget that we have this year. This isn't doing anything extra at all. We still have work to do. Once this is over, once we approve whatever we approve tonight, we're still going to have to take a look at things, whether they're cuts or whether they're exemptions, which I hope we get to look at exemptions again before the end of the calendar year. But we're a long ways off having our self-sufficient budget ironed out. We're working on it, but we need to make steps in the, to get ourselves balanced this year. This is part of that.
Okay, Councilman Gard?
Nothing.
Okay, further, so on the main motion, to increase the sales tax cap from $3,000 to $7,500. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Next item. Ordinance 1160 is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code, Chapter 5.40 to repeal Cordova Municipal Code 5.40.090, eliminating the compensatory collection discount from sales tax. A first reading. And I believe the fiscal note on this was $30,000.
Yes.
Okay.
And may I add, as soon as you vote on this, I was gonna do this at the beginning of this conversation, but it went faster than I anticipated. We have a little presentation for you. We've built a spreadsheet that shows the impact on the screen from the computer that'll show you the impact of these changes to an individual business. And you can change the numbers to see what the impact is. So we'd like to do that for you. We'll just take a minute with it.
Councilman Gard?
Can I ask one quick question? When we did this and came up with our 374 or 354 or whatever the number is that you've been fine tuning as time went by, this $30,000 was already figured in before that shortfall?
No.
Okay.
I took out all the revenue except for the 20,000 pilt and the change in the fish tax to 800. We had a couple of smaller numbers in there, some staff sharing and so forth, but this budget is real clean in terms of the first version that I did that had assumptions.
Okay, council, just so you have ordinance 1160 in front of you.
Move to accept.
So we have a motion to approve ordinance 1160.
Second.
In a second. Councilman Gard, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'm about at this point in time is I just trying to figure out where we're gonna get the dollars to balance our budget. So we haven't come to agreement on other major portions of stuff we've been looking at, so I guess this is one of the places where we still have a chance to collect some dollars to balance the budget.
So you're speaking in favor of your motion?
I'm speaking in favor of my motion.
All right. Discussion. Councilman Ellison.
Yeah, although it does cost businesses to collect this tax for us. We're partners in this business, and it is sales tax collected on behalf of the city, so I'm in favor of this. I guess I look at it a little different than Councilmember Guard is looking at it. He keeps referring to where we're gonna come up with enough revenues to make our budget. I guess I'm still with Councilmember Jones on that fact, that I think that there's more cuts that can be made, and I don't mean cuts like removing the road topping part of the budget or removing the school's boiler part of the budget. I think that I think we do have to look at staffing, though nobody likes to cut anybody's position. If we can eliminate 2 or 3 or however many positions are in our 3-year plan by attrition, if we can do without that position next year by attrition, then I think we can do without that position this year. So we need to look at our staffing a little closer, I think, and I think there are other places to cut. But I do support this particular motion, and that brings us pretty close to balancing our budget. But I think that, as was mentioned, I think by Councilmember Weiss, there's a long ways to go here. So this is not where we're at $10 million plus is not a sustainable budget for a community our size, I do not believe. So anyway, I support it at this time.
Councilman Jones.
Well, I will speak against this motion. I'm not in favor of this. My reasoning for this is that currently we collect 3.1-ish million in sales tax. Let's just assume that half of all the transactions in town are credit card sales. Credit card companies will charge you between 1% and 3%, depending on who you choose, if you rent your machine, all that. So if half of our sales tax is collected via credit card sales, it'll be 1.55 million. Could be more, could be less. At 1%, the cost to business owners to collect this tax for us is $15,000. At 2%, it's $30,000. At 3%, it's going to be $45,000 a year, is what local businesses pay to collect tax on our behalf. Like Mr. Allison said, we're business partners, or we're partners with these businesses, and I mean, it's only up to $200, 2% up to $200. So, odds are, depending on the business, like I'm sure Shoreside probably loses money no matter what. The smaller businesses, mom and pop stores, there's already a burden, cost of labor to file these returns quarterly, to collect this, to keep track of it. It might not be much, but it is a cost to businesses. And I just don't want that to be lost on this council. And I'm opposed to that for this reason. With the 2 ordinances that we have already passed, we're at $301,000. Means we're $53,000 away. That's less than 0.5% of our total budget. I feel like we can cut 0.5% of the total budget. There has to be something to trim. It's not even a full exempt position. It's 0.65 of an exempt position or a non-exempt position. I mean, we can make this work without this ordinance, with what we've already passed tonight. I'll yield my time.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burton.
Maybe a phone. I don't know if Mr. Weiss or somebody else is online, but anyway, a lot of background noise. But I appreciate Mr. Jones's math, but that's kind of, again, misleading. The credit card processing fees are for the transaction in general, not necessarily just sales tax. And it's a business expense again, and we've also heard testimony from business members that say calculating sales tax, if you have a computer system, is actually not that big of a deal. So, I've done it. It's not that hard. we are gonna be having to look at other things too. I'm for the motion.
Hey, Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I'd just like to rebuttal. The math that I used was based on only the sales tax that is collected, not on total sales, total credit card sales. It's only on the 6%. And the credit card companies do charge you on that 6%. It's the total amount of your transaction, which includes tax. So.
Further discussion. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Councilman Weiss, I didn't hear your vote.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Unfinished business. Would you like to share some of the impact?
Unfinished business.
Okay.
On the ordinances.
Okay.
I'd like to, if I could, I've tried to remain silent here while you discuss these issues, but I'd like to point out a couple of things to you. You know, we have 29 exemptions and exceptions in the code. And I would offer to you that over time, that code has been altered in a manner specific to somebody's likes and dislikes regarding either their business interests or their personal interests. And now what you have is a hodgepodge of stuff that's almost hard to keep up with. It's got to have a legal interpretation to change anything. I would offer to you, just based upon my limited time here, knowing businesses that don't file, businesses that do a variety of things where they're not paying tax. You can go ahead, Leif, and shoot that up there if you want. That we could pay for a full-time tax auditor just to keep track of this stuff and probably collect additional revenue for the city. I mean, I think that, you know, that comes down to an enforcement issue. If some of us choose, if we choose to enforce a particular section of the code and someone doesn't like it, and depending upon, you know, their relationship, that can cause problems. We either have to enforce things or we don't enforce things. And that's been pointed out in meetings several times. So every time you make an exception to a rule, you create an enforcement nightmare. And my experience so far is we have an enforcement nightmare here. We don't have the ability to enforce our own tax code because we don't have people that can do that. And we should be doing it, and I would offer that we could more than pay for a position just to do that. So we have a little, the other thing I would say is that, you know, increases in taxes that affect businesses in particular are write-offs on your income. And so the effect is not nearly as impactful, I think, as on an individual where you can't write off that expense. And then I wanted to point out here, we've done some assumptions here. We tried to create a family with a home value and monthly expenditures to create sort of a profile here. We just got this number from the assessor on home value. They were just here, so this number is pretty hot off the press right here. Actually, it's just a hair higher than that, but that's the number of your average family home here. Cable costs, internet costs, cell phone costs, you can see down the line. Assuming that you spend $1,000 every month on groceries. $600 worth of expendable income. And by the way, the 81,000 is the average. Explain that to me again, Leif.
The median income,
Household income?
yes.
Median household income is $81,000 in Cordova. So we're making some assumptions on, home improvements and so forth. So you can see the impact of the tax per month. Sales tax impact is about $130. The property tax is $316 a month. And the fuel tax on average, making assumptions at $3.88 a gallon, certain miles driven, that you pay about $97 in fuel tax a month. So your total tax burden, if you take out the property tax, assuming for like a renter that doesn't have a home,
Yeah, so we'll delete the assessed value and put in rent.
and put it in rent, assuming $1,000 rent, you can see what happens to the tax. Total tax per month goes from 400 and some, because your tax involves property taxes, it goes down to the total tax per month is $191. And I'm not making judgments about these things, I'm just trying to show you the impact of changes for folks. Of course, the sales tax rate, can you redo that at 6.5%? You can see what that does. It changes about $15 on the sales tax per month, the impact. So I realize it's $15, but just trying to demonstrate to you, we have this now. So when we get to the budget discussions, I'd like to use this for us to consider some of the things that, or perhaps in the next reading, we can consider some of these things as we're going forward. And we try to make a pretty accurate portrayal. Of course, someone can always disagree with our numbers, but we've tried to be pretty close. Unless you have any questions, yes.
So I just want to make a point. I'm not sure if the people that are on the phone can see it, this on the screen. If you take that total per year, 45,000, say this is for a family of 4, so you subtract 4,400 in dividends, so you're down to, $41,000 a year is what they're going to spend to live in our community. You tax them $2,500. That's more than 3/4 of a month's wages for that family, just in tax alone for the year. You're taking 3/4 of what somebody makes in a whole month, just for city tax. Then they're talking about adding state tax, we have federal tax. You're gonna be taxing this person.
Well, the total tax per month is 207.
Yeah, but the
total tax per year is 25.
Yeah, I'm just saying, this person's making $3,300 a month to support their family, and you're gonna tax them $2,500 for a whole year. I just wanna make that point.
Okay, I just wanted to show you that chart, and we'll work on it some more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was unfinished business. New and miscellaneous business is our pending agenda and calendar.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burton.
I'm glad that the topic of exemptions came up, because as I went through the packet this week, over the last few days, I wanted to see the list of exemptions brought in front of us, like I mentioned in one of my comments a while ago, so we could take a look at those and do some work with exemptions, maybe eliminating some.
Okay, okay. We went through that list, right? There's 29, and a lot of them are in place because of legal reasons and so forth, and I think it was whittled down to a group, like 4 to 6 of them that were...
Well, I think what we had for you is, and I'll have to resend the chart to you, we did a spreadsheet for you on the exemptions and exceptions, and tried to determine the value of either eliminating or changing that. The real, a substantial impact was only available in a couple of those. And I think, you know, we talked about those at the time and sort of eliminated those at the time, but I can bring that back out. I'll get that sent out to y'all again tomorrow. And you can take a look at it.
That's kind of where I just want to remind council, we've been through all those exemptions and looked at them and kind of came to the conclusion there wasn't a lot there, but certainly worth revisiting.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burton.
I know we did that in part of the strategic planning process, but that was one of the meetings that, with fishing schedule and things like that, I couldn't be part of. So I wanted to see it again. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's new councilmen as well, so. We can put that on the pending agenda for our next November regular meeting.
Sure.
Okay, it's November 1st, I think.
What are we putting on?
Just to review the exemptions, sales tax exemptions. Is that sales tax exemptions primarily?
Yes.
And I think we should probably look at the November 15th regular meeting for the clerk's evaluation. I don't recall if we put that on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Jones.
we're still on pending agenda.
Yeah.
I would like to look at some more budget topics in the future as far as expenditures go. It'd be nice to get everybody around the table and have a discussion in a workshop. You know, right now we're $20,000 short from our goal still, so we're gonna have to trim something.
You have 3 meetings left.
Okay.
By ordinance, and we are on first readings now, so there's only 2 more.
Well, for these particular things, for the budget,
yeah,
we're getting very, very close. I'm gonna be gone for the next 10 days, so I'm gonna have 1 day to prepare for the council meeting on the 1st. If we have to we're probably gonna have to have an ordinance on the agenda for, you know, in the next 2 meetings. So we're gonna have to have those discussions. After the meeting where you requested that we have a work session on the budget, we tried to put a budget together, or a meeting together. We couldn't get enough folks to do that. So, you know, it'd have to be after the first of the year sometime.
Yeah, because an ordinance requires 3 readings, and we're just running out of meetings to do that, so.
Mm-hmm. And then one more thing is, I'm sure we have it on the pending agenda already, but the marijuana stuff, that's coming up soon.
Mm-hmm. So we have a draft marijuana ordinance, and that'll probably be surfacing.
We do. We have a schedule for that to come before you. December 6th? Yes. December 6th will be I don't know if that's first reading or ordinance comes before you on December 6th. It's been to the Planning Commission, but.
And then, Council, I didn't put it on the agenda, but I did mention in my mayor's report that we have a regular election in March each year. And if the council wants to put something before the community to get community feedback on like a local opt-out for marijuana or other items of interest, that's the most cost-effective time and place to do it because we're having an election anyway. So putting something on that ballot is the kind of the timely, cost-effective way to do it.
So we have the special election coming up in November.
Yeah, it's too late to get anything on that, really, right, Tina?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, by ordinance, so. Okay, so sounds like clerks on the 15th and review the exemptions on November 1st meeting. And I'm gonna be on leave November 1st, hunting my elk permit, so I'll need someone to stand in as vice mayor at that meeting. Okay, audience participation. Yes. Doesn't have to be an agenda item.
No, this is, so.
Okay.
It's back to sales tax cap. Don Scott, 204 Boardwalk Way for North Star Lumber. I can remember when the sales tax cap started, there was two things. There was engine motors for fishermen and building materials, because building materials, you got your tax through property tax. Since then, all these other exemptions have come in place. You've got people renting houses, they're here for 6 months, one invoice, $180. You guys need to clean up the exemptions before you raise the tax cap. That's all.
Thank you. Further audience comments? Okay. Council comments. I'll start to my left. Councilman Jones.
I just want to thank everybody in the audience for coming tonight. Tell all your friends and family. We've got 2 more readings. And, appreciate it if everybody can keep showing up and voicing their thoughts on these ordinances. Obviously, I'm not in favor of raising taxes. I think you probably got that tonight. I just want to thank all my fellow council members for putting up with me tonight. I want to thank Alan for taking the time to answer my questions over the email this week, and really hope you enjoy your 10 days off. You deserve it.
Thanks. Okay, Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'd like to thank Councilmember Ken for his email questions and the manager's response to that. At some point in time, it'd be nice to be the federal government or a fish hatchery where we could set our budget and then create the revenues to meet that budget. Unfortunately, like most individuals, we aren't in that position. And we have to do what individuals do. If somebody gets hurt and can't make any money for the year, then they gotta do something the next year to pay the bills. The school district, if they have 50 less students, they need to do and get 500,000 less from the state, then they need to do something to make that budget. We can't always come up with just try to make more and more and more to pay our bills. We have to cut our expenses. So I know we've only got a few meetings left to do that, but I believe at our next meeting the full budget will be before us, and there will be time to make amendments and hope we get some support from the other council members to make some of those cuts. As was mentioned, we're pretty close. Now, if the ordinances that were passed tonight all pass again next time, but that's never a given. A lot of times we will vote on first reading to get more comments out there from the public on the second reading. So just because they pass tonight doesn't mean they're gonna pass next time. You've got the opportunity, the public has the opportunity, those out in radio land have the opportunity to still express your opinions to us. Let us know what works and what doesn't work for you. So I look forward to continuing on. I'm not worried about balancing the budget one way or another. We will make cuts to make it work, and we will make it work. So thank you for your support, and we look forward to more comments.
Councilman Gard.
Well, first I'd like to thank Councilman Jones for putting up with me tonight. And I also am not in favor of raising taxes. but I am in favor of raising revenues for where we are now. If we decide as a community that we can't support what we have now, we need to see what services we want to not have, instead of just paring off pieces here and paring off pieces there, so we can fit this number we come up with that's palatable to all of us, that we end up deferring maintenance, we don't end up taking care of stuff, and we end up in a terrible hole on down the road. So if we do want to lessen our tax burden and lessen our costs to live here as community members, then we need to sit down and talk about what services we just want to not have, instead of just trying to shave pieces off the whole budget to make it fit in something that it really isn't gonna do when we're supplying all these services.
Councilman Burton?
I don't think I could have said it better than Councilman Guard did. I think he hit the nail on the head there. I agree with every one of his statements. Again, I appreciate audience participation. I unfortunately can't see who all is in the audience and whatnot, but I can see council on the YouTube live stream, so that's cool. That's a neat feature to have. I'm glad that that's up and running now. Yeah, we still have a long way to go with our long-term budget planning. You know, it's not just 1 year, it's every year, and we'll find it out, but it takes time, and it's gonna take willingness to either pay for services or just decide there's some services we're just not gonna have anymore. So, anyway, I appreciate everybody's time, thank you.
Councilman Weiss?
Yeah, I'd like to thank both Councilman Guard and Jones for everything they had to say, and I would like to just think about us sometime drawing to attention for our enforcement. We had Don come up twice today or tonight and talk about what he fears, and it's come up at a public meeting before where he's got a lumber competitor that doesn't have that there's no tax getting collected on. That's what he's competing with. I won't say who it is, but I think enforcement for what we have to do is definitely something for us to look at, and just thank you, audience, for coming and for all of your participation. And that's great that our YouTube channel's up. I didn't know about it. Got to read. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we do have an executive session item, so we'll just go ahead and allow a few minutes to, we'll just take a 5-minute recess to go into executive session.